Intonation is just like those other things. It will eliminate you at an audition. And there are certain things that we can be eliminated on, certain objective things. When someone sits on a committee, they're actually looking for easy ways to say no. Sounds terrible, doesn't it? But it's the truth. I've been on a number of committees. Something like the ending of Petrushka Ballerina. Yakata-kata-kata-kata. Should be simple enough. But most of us will play this. Yakata-kata-kata-kata. And the last note will be sharp. Why is it sharp? It's probably the true note. Because the other notes, because we double tongue or even single tongue, forces the pitch to go down 90% of all trumpet players. A lot of you don't know that. And so here you play that, you get to the last note, yup, and everybody on the committee, of course, that aren't trumpet players, hear it. They're thinking, good player, and they listen. And they hear that, and right away they're suspicious and they're listening if there's other problems. If you're out of tune with yourself, you'll be excused. I guarantee it. Because it's one of those objective things. And when you have oboe players and flute players and clarinet players and string players on that committee, they have better ears than all the brass players. Better ears. Because they grew up with instruments that weren't as faulty. And this is what I want to get to. Here's our problem on the trumpet. I'll make a statement that some people might argue with, but I want you to let it sink in. The trumpet is the most out-of-tune instrument in the orchestra. It is. They all have problems. And so some people might say, well, the violin, are you kidding? But they have the wherewithal to make it into. So does the trombone. So does the horn. And the trumpet has the least abilities, at least up until recent years, and I'm talking 30, 40 years. Now with the advent of first valve slides, third valve slides, when I got my first Bach C trumpet, it was extra money to get a first valve slide saddle. You had to pay extra for that. That's like buying a car and have to pay extra for the motor. It's a necessity. So here's what the problem is. That we started, how many people started on trumpet? Maybe half the room. A few of you may have started on piano or violin or something like that and switched over to a better instrument because it was too easy, because others were too easy. You wanted a challenge. I say that all the time to my friends that play any instrument. I say, oh yeah, I started on the horn, and I say it with absolute straight face, and they look at me. I said, it wasn't any challenge. I said, so I switched to the trumpet. And I leave that for a while. And then I really get them when I say, well, after all, on the horn, you can push any valve down. You get any note. So fingerings aren't difficult. But the problem, if you started on the trumpet, this little jewel here, I don't have to take it. I think you know what that looks like. But this instrument right here becomes your model for what a scale should sound like. Imagine that. Now, someday, after we do this class, I want you to write all the notes that you play. And it borders on, well, if you can play 3 octaves, that'd be what? 12 in an octave? 36 notes. 3 octaves would be including your low F. You all should learn a low F on your trumpet. Throwing the slide out immediately. Having a stop there. Or if you don't have a stop, maybe using your fingernail, which goes beyond the stop. Like a trombone would do for third position, gets the finger with his bell. I mean, it's the bell with his finger. Like that. And if you need to make sure you're not sharp, it'd be something like that. But you need to learn to play a low F on both a B flat and a C trumpet. Certainly a C trumpet. So, low F through high E. That's 3 octaves. You might want to just write down sometime on staff paper all those notes and tell what you know about each one as time goes by, whether it tends to be a lot sharp, a lot flat, a little sharp. You'll find that you're lucky to have a quarter of the notes that you could say are in tune. That's not very good. That's not a very good percentage. Now, most of you know about 2 notes. Probably all of you know about 2 notes that you were told when you were very young, the low C sharp and the low D. And how many people could stand up here and explain to a class of relatively intelligent people why C sharp and low D are sharp? The harmonic series has nothing to do with it. That's another problem. In our series of notes that we play on the harmonic series, and most of you are aware of that, we don't play number 1 because it's so flat. It doesn't work on the trumpet. It's so flat. If we would take the harmonic series, and I'll get to all the, you'll see it on the sheet. The harmonic series, for those who don't know, are all the notes you could play open, or all the notes you could play second valve, or first, or whatever. How many harmonic series do we have on our trumpet? How many different pitched ones?
7.
Close? No, it's more than 7. 7 positions on a trombone, but the trumpet can get more. I just told you a hint. We've got low F. So we have an 8th one right there. And if you're really clever and desperate in a certain particular passage, and you don't have a reversible slide, tuning slide on the C trumpet, or an H pipe or an A pipe, you have another one. You have that one. You can pull that out. Long before I got this little tuning device that John Hastings designed, I had a mark on my slide, and now I can't really use it unless I know about it in advance, and I will then put real thick slide grease on this, or I'll hold it and play some passage that maybe is a little more awkward, and I'll lower the instrument a half step and play the passage a half step higher. All right. Basically speaking, we have 7 or 8 or possibly 9 different natural trumpets or overtone series. And each one of those, unfortunately, there's various notes in that harmonic series that are out of tune, and I'll talk about that. The obvious one is the 5th partial. Now, we're going to talk in partials, not overtones. And I'll tell you right now that let's say we're going to do the C overtone series. All the C's, pedal C, the next C, the next C, the next C, the next C, all the way up, are mathematical doubles. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, if you can play it. So that's the way you can relate. 1, 2, 4, 8, all are C's. Okay? So 5 is in the grouping of 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And that is a C, E, G, B flat, C. Dominant 7th chord. Interesting that it occurs in nature. Now in that chord, if we just take the 4, 5, and 6, the 5th partial, if you have a normal trumpet, that means a lead pipe that's correspondingly made for the size of that instrument. And I just mentioned an A pipe and an H pipe and an S pipe and an R pipe for Bach C trumpets. Basically all those other than the H pipe. The H pipe was named after Herse, but the H was just meant to be the normal C trumpet, the normal H pipe. And there were people like Charlie Schluter, S pipe, Bernie Edelstein, A pipe, and then an R pipe, which just was a reversible. They were all modification, various B flat lead pipes. Maybe you're aware of that. But as soon as you throw on a different pipe, it will change that overtone series to a certain degree. It just happens. However, the 5th partial will always be flat. Flat. Always is flat. Now in nature, 4, 5, and 6, C, E, G, a flat 5th partial or 1/3 of the chord, guess what? That's why we prefer thirds, major thirds, low in a major chord, because it occurs in nature. That's where it sits. Harmonically, it's the only place it can be. That's why we prefer to lower that note. How many knew that we lower major thirds? Good. Good for you. Excellent. I didn't know that. This kind of stuff wasn't told to me when I was a student here. Wasn't told to anybody. I wasn't told that mutes made you go sharp. I wasn't told that A's were sharp. We have 7 or 8 or 9. We'll call them 7. 7th series. And only 3 valves. Counting open, that means there's only 4 real lengths of tubing to represent 4 notes. As we combine those tubings, now it will not be sufficient. In other words, this slide was made the right length to lower an open pitch, period. Okay? But if I put this one on, if I put this slide down, this is a different pitch now. It has this length. And if I want to lower it a half step, that will not be sufficient, period. Because that slide was made to lower open a half step. Now I'm asking it to lower the B flat a half step. All you have to do one day is to take out your C trumpet and put it on your lap and your B flat trumpet on your lap and look at the length of the second slide on both instruments. The second slide on the B flat trumpet was made to lower a concert B flat, open, right? All following me? An open note, concert B flat, a half step. That's the proper length. But to lower the C trumpet, a half step on a concert B flat, C trumpet, a half step on a concert B flat. Now look at that second valve slide on the C trumpet. It's not the same length as the B flat trumpet. And that's the difference of what you need to do to lower every 1 and 2 slide, every 1 and 2 combination on your trumpet. You've all heard that, right? Lower A's and E's. Some of you haven't. A's and E's, you gotta lower them. A's and E's, all over. All of them. I mean, it's not just whenever you think of it, and it's not just, I'll lip it down. You know, I have a good ear. How could you possibly have a good ear if you started on the trumpet? My biggest point is you must retrain your ear. I think I still lost some of you in the room, and I'm sorry. Hopefully you'll catch this another time. But it's, remember, this slide, this tube, this length of tubing right here, for the second valve, was made to lower a half step from the open. This was made to lower a whole step. Guess what? Trumpet makers around the world, most of them, have made this a little what? Short or long? Right. How many people knew that? Very few. Isn't that amazing? Now, anybody know why they did that? We're talking about that much. Very, very small. Anybody know why? Remember when you switched to your C trumpets? The first thing your teacher said, okay, now you have to play an alternate for E, open E, 1 and 2. Second valve E flat. Why didn't they tell you anything about D? Well, 1 and 3 would be ungodly sharp, but at least you could fix it. Because first slide was made a little short, only for the D. Just for the D to make it closer. It's still flat, but it's closer. And trumpet makers, years ago, Arbin was one of the first valve players. He was certainly the world's best valve player, cornet player, in the 1860s in Europe. That's why he was made the first professor of cornet at the Paris Conservatory. And believe me, it was a rebellion at that school. The trumpet players and teachers didn't like him or the concept of having to learn fingerings. Imagine. So he was a rebel. And he basically taught us the valve fingerings. By the way, I would just like to tell you, one of the rules in the valve fingerings, and some of you don't know this, is that we generally choose the least amount of tubing for every note to be consistently even in a scale. The birth of the cornet was because the trumpet was so horribly out of tune when they started putting valves on them. Going from what? See, this lead pipe is a compromise. It's a lead pipe for somewhere in the middle. You should have really a different size lead pipe for every length, right? If you want for every overtone series, you'd need to have a separate lead pipe. Well, that's not possible. I don't know how you could do that. Back in the 1860s, they were making compensating valve instruments to try to fix the bad intonation. Way back then. And they were some amazing, amazing systems. They were heavy. They had a different third slide when you would combine it. A different second slide when you would combine it with other fingerings. You did this. It was an amazing system, and Arbin designed one of them. A man named Bouvet, and it was a C trumpet. Imagine, in 1867, the Arbin Bouvet C trumpet. So they knew about intonation much earlier. I mean, they know about it. They knew about it more than you do. Unfortunately, many trumpet makers in recent years have no clue. If they're going to sell, if Bach is going to say this is an extra cost to put this saddle on, they are not thinking. It's a necessity. Absolute necessity. So we're dealing with the overtone series. Now I mentioned the fifth partial. The sixth partial is what? Thank you. Sixth partial is sharp. It's hard to find a trumpet that isn't. What you want to do is when you try out trumpets, you have a couple important issues. One is, do you like its sound? That's really hard to tell in a little practice room where you're trying it out. You need to try it out on a stage and see if it fits with your section or with the people you're playing, or whether if you're a student, it's going to be a good instrument for where you're at school. Ease of playing, that's going to be a toughie because you're going to still remember how the old instrument plays. So you probably buy one that's similar to that or a little easier. It's not a good issue. One that's even in sound throughout the registers, important. Intonation, especially on those open partial notes, very important. If it's a C trumpet, you want your C's to line up. Wouldn't it be terrible to have a low C that's sharp, a middle C, or a middle C that's sort of in tune, and a high C, a quarter tone flat? That would be terrible. So you'd want to hopefully have those three C's line up and know that that sixth partial probably could lean a little sharp. That's okay. You got to have a tuner in that room. And that your fifth partial is probably going to be low. And that's okay. That's all right. In the orchestra, in the large orchestra, it's against the law for the high instruments to play flat. You're tarred and feathered if you play flat in your high instruments. You can get away with playing a little sharp, but you can never play flat. And the converse, the opposite, absolutely. The tuba players, the bass players, they play sharp, you take them outside and string them up. It's better to be low because that's what our ears tolerate. That's what we accept. Trumpet players, unfortunately, have taken it a little bit too far, and so most trumpet players scream sharp. What do you think happens to trumpet players when they get tired? We're talking about a developed trumpet player, not a beginner. Because it'll be different. I heard whispers.
Sharp.
Yeah. You know why? Why would we go sharp? If we're getting tired, why would we go higher? Any ideas, any theories about that? Yeah. Yeah, you're trying a little harder to get those notes than when you would be more fresh. And it's common. So if you're playing a long postlude with the organ at church, first of all, you're going to be sharp before you start because your organ is not tuned like the piano. Because if you start pulling stops here, it's going to get pretty confusing when some stops aren't throwing those up there. Those babies are locking right in. You start playing the upper register with the organ, you'll scream sharp. It's one of the it's on the list, you'll get it. You have to learn how to play with other instruments and be aware of what their problems are and how different you are from them. You'll have to come down quite a bit. Now you're getting a little tired. This is something you can learn. This is something you find out. Now I'm getting a little tired. I'm just going to pull out. Why fight it? And actually the notes are easier to play then. If you're not trying to lift them down when you're tired, that's a double thing, especially if your ear is making the adjustment. Most trumpet players, I hate to tell you, don't make that adjustment because they don't hear it. That's the sad part. Okay. Here's the biggest number one problem. I've thrown a few things at you to hopefully get everybody in the room to be aware of our ignorance as trumpet players.